Welcome to Minerva, a monthly show where we discuss the mysteries. We hope to give you enough information that you can go away and do your own study. Now, first of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host Duncan.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about Coral Castle. Now, to begin this mystery, we need to understand the person who's at the very forefront of it. And it's a gentleman called Ed Leedskalnin. Now, he was a Latvian immigrant, and he was a self-taught engineer in many ways. The story goes that he was left at the altar by his childhood sweet 16, Agnes. Now, he was absolutely heartbroken. She didn't turn up for his wedding, and he had enough, and he decided to emigrate or decided to go and visit Canada. He went to Canada and believe he was involved as a kind of lumberjack in that kind of trade. He then later on moved down through Canada into the USA. He was a very interesting figure, and I found out a lot of my information on this by reading a book called Waiting for Agnes by a guy called Joe Bullard, who said it was a novel, but actually the vast majority in it is true. There's just some other bits to add a bit of flavour and a bit of lore, which we will get onto in a moment, because there is a lot of fact and fiction on this. But essentially what happens is Ed Leedskalnin builds a castle made of coral in Florida. And the mystery around this is how he did that, why he did it as well. So those early stages, Agnes being left at the altar, and are we seeing once again a mystery being tied up, and are we seeing a mystery being flavoured by these other little things on the outside to make it more interesting, or do we believe in the Agnes theory?
Oh, Shane, if you stopped it before the Agnes theory, I could have gone, yeah. You could have just cut it short just there. But you've added more on the end. Yeah, I think because the book, I think the one you mentioned, comes in a lot later in the sense that chronologically of everything. Yeah. And so it's kind of hard to find out what is actually the train of events. I must admit, I'm far more the sense of a lot of stuff has been added later or embellished upon. Because, I mean, to my understanding, the only time he's actually really mentioned about any lost love is when someone said, you know, why did you do all this? And he said, for Sweet 16. And I'm more of the opinion that something's been added to that they're like the jilted love. I don't know how much evidence there is that did actually happen. But the great thing is, I think there is so much to take apart. So the mystery definitely exists. Yeah. But the main part is to take away the fact from fiction and what's been embellished for, as you say, you know, to make a story work. Yeah,
he moved to Florida, and we know that, and he starts to build this castle from local coral rock. So he's got his own quarry, really. He's finding the rock underneath and he's building that. But he did it at night time. And all of the locals, agreed to this, that he would work in the evening. He would work under the canopy of darkness, so to speak, and that always creates mystery, right?
It does when you say it like that, under the cover of darkness. But yeah, go on.
But he also built it on his own.
Yeah.
He didn't have any help, and there's these huge blocks, massive blocks that a person couldn't in any way carry now. This is in the 1920s, and he's also only 5 foot tall, so he's not a big guy. Yeah. You would need some really sophisticated material now to be able to put this together. And they didn't have that then. So how did he do it? How did he cut the stone? How did he create this castle?
I think you're over-dramatising it. You would need modern-day equipment to do it, because I disagree with that. I mean, one thing that says, how do you cut it? We've actually got photographs of him standing in front of massive great saws attached to a wheel thing. So if you want to know how he did it, look at the photographs. Yeah. It is actually there. And I also think possibly it's rather a grandiose title to call it a castle. You know, we're in England, we've seen castles, and that's like, oh, we're looking at that. I think, was it like a 2-bedroom sort of like block that he was living in? Was it something?
Yeah, in one of the corners there's a block which is sort of 2 stories high. The rest of it's open plan.
Yeah, so but really, some of as a castle, it's like there's no battlements. There's no. It's again a grand, but that doesn't decrease what he actually did. But we've got the saws of how he actually cut it. Coral of a certain density, it's strong enough to do. Is it easier to cut by that? Well, I think it's evident because we've got the things there. But also, the guy worked as a lumberjack in Canada.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't actively involved in it, he would have been using the pulley systems and all the bits. Trying to lift logs of any size is going to be, if not heavier, than trying to move coral rock. So I think he's definitely got the experience from actually there. There's no denying his skill in the sense of then transferring it over to actually stonework, even with coral work. But no, I disagree in the sense of we need to look at modern equipment. I think the equipment was there in the 1920s, evidently, in the sense if you can move wooden logs in Canada, then you can move stone in America.
Very true. I mean, obviously, he did do it, but to be able to do that on your own is a pretty impressive feat, I think. And I think that's what impressed a lot of people at the time and created this mystery around it, in the fact that, there's this one guy doing this on his own. And
I'm going to say, but as you said, I didn't mention it, but you just said about he did it in the dark and at night time. That is a bit of this. I suppose this is where the mystery comes up. Because as soon as you start doing things secretly or in the dark, same as Freemasonry, everybody asks, why? What are you trying to hide and bits and pieces? So it adds to the mystique. But it is, for myself, it's an incredible work of art. And if an artist feels more impassioned at night time, I'm in the zone sort of thing. It can be as simple as that. Nighttime, this is where I want to do it. I mean, if later on it adds a mystique that makes people more curious, so therefore you then get your guests or your clients to come in and go, oh, what is this? Yeah, also well and good. But I don't think we should really knock out just the artistic flavour that goes in.
No, and there are some of the objects are incredibly ornate in the sense, there's lots of chairs and places for people to sit.
Rocking chairs,
and
which
rocking
is
chairs
like,
they look really good. One of the other things that we know about him was that he was, again, a self-taught engineer, but interested in engineering, interested in that type of field. And he wrote pamphlets and did a lot of study and work in magnetism, electricity, etc. And that has led to the theory that somehow he was levitating these...
I'm sorry. Straight face. Yes,
he was levitating these rocks. And he was putting them into place that way. Now, I know where you're going to go with this, but there are photos of tripods that he had put up, massive tripods of wooden tripods with big black boxes on the top. And some people say that those boxes are housing some kind of electrical current. There's some way that he was using magnetism to try and help him do this, because he was probably not necessarily a leader, but he was writing pamphlets at the time and actually someone at the forefront of that type of research.
Yes. Right, okay. Where do I start? It's very clear he had an interest in magnets, electrical magnet systems. It's evident in his pamphlets. But it's also a guy who is an artist who is trying to make money. And if he's got an interest in that, and there's an interest of people buying from there, then yes, that's it. I mean, we both have interests in things that are outside the field. It doesn't mean that they're specifically nice. I like cars, I like Freemasonry. The two things don't, automatically go parallel. So he's allowed to be interested in other things. But because there's a black box on the top of a pillar, it doesn't necessarily mean it houses a magnet. It could just literally house the pulley that has the chain that comes down and pushes up. So I mean, if you've got 3 pillars, to stop them falling apart, if you put something on top, that's it. You've secured the 3 ones to have the pulley system that goes underneath. But people love it. I think it was like in one of again, depends on the chronological look. In one point, it turns around and says when the locals were interested in what he was doing, I think some children or youngsters turned around and said, he's using magnets to actually do it. So that started the mythos of it. But how often have we heard about electric magnets or sound moving rocks, even for ideas for ancient Egyptians sort of thing? It's, if a mystery is there, it gets thrown in. He was quoted as saying that when people asked him how he did it, he said, I knew the techniques of the ancient Egyptians or the pyramids or how the pyramids were built. And again, there is some research, there is some study that says that his grandfather was also an engineer and he learnt some techniques from him. And again, there may have been some passing on to him. But I'm with you. I don't think he was levitating these rocks, but I do think he was probably using some ahead of time techniques that he didn't want to show other people. Oh, maybe not just ahead of time, but maybe actually more retrospective. I mean, we've looked at some of the stone things where the people are trying to think, how did they cut through this massive block?
Yes.
And we think they're sawing through, where they're not. They actually drill something like, wasn't it like 3 holes? And you keep wedging it through and it splits.
Yeah.
And I mean, my father-in-law, he used to be a builder, and he moved over to Spain, and he wanted an archway built, so he built it in as an Englishman would do, building the bricks arch.
Yeah.
And apparently all the Spanish builders stopped and was watching him do it because they built in a completely different way. Right. So it's understandable that possibly, over there, well, he says, I was doing the Egyptian way because he knew this method, and his grandfather said, well, that's actually what they used to do. True or not, doesn't matter, but if that's what his grandfather said, it seems that an ancient technique but works, maybe, could be the way.
Yeah. Another really interesting part of this mystery is that at some point he gets the crazy idea that he wants to move.
Yeah.
And he only moves 10 miles down the road. And I suppose in the 1920s, that's far.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable distance. But he moves 10 miles down the road, so he takes the whole castle with him. And what is said is that he wants to take the castle with him, but he obviously doesn't, again, want to show the techniques of doing this. So he employs a driver, and the driver turns up with a lorry in the morning.
Yeah.
And they take the stuff, and then he comes back, and then overnight, Ed will put the stones back on the lorry so the guy can't see. He then turns up again in the morning, and he drives it to the new place. And they do that a couple of times to make sure that you can move the whole of the coral castle to this new place. Now, again, that must have taken some technique. That must have taken a lot of hard work and effort. And also, just why move?
Like anything, why move? And we've moved, houses on our own time. Change of view. We don't know the circumstances. There might be a practical one. It could also be a publicity stunt. Look, I can do this. I'm going to move down there, and he tell me, look what I can do. It could be so many things. I would be cautious though when we say it's like he did it under the cover of darkness because he didn't want people to know. Again, it could be down to the simple thing of he's a nighttime person. I want to work at night. I'm an artist. This is my time. And the other part, if this was his life work, I mean, if you were a pianist and you had your piano, and that's your life. You built the piano. You play the piano. Is that, and you could move it. Would you really just pay somebody else to come along, move my piano, please? Just don't know. No, do you know what? Just leave the truck there. I'll get the piano on. I'll get the piano off. It could be the same sort of thing. It's just to find out how passionate he was about it. Was it a case of was he just building a home, or is this his art to him? This is his life's work.
It is, and I think he had a dual kind of purpose in that sense. He had the Coral Castle and that life's work there, and he was also doing this other research and producing those pamphlets.
Yeah.
And some of those are really interesting because they're in a number of different subjects. And one of those subjects is sort of moral education.
Yeah.
Which is really a really kind of strange thing, almost how to teach children and how to bring people up. And he creates this book, this pamphlet that is a normal book, but on the left-hand side it's printed, and on the right-hand side it's open.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing on it. And he says, reader, if for any reason you do not like the things that I put in this little book, then I've left the right-hand side completely free for you to improve it or for you to write something better. Yeah. And I just think from an egotistical point of view, that is such a wonderful thing to be so open and honest and able to say, this is my truth, but it's not necessarily everybody's.
To be honest, I see it a lot more than just being an example of not being egotistical. It seems the most subtle, but most powerful way to get the person to engage with what he's writing. Because he puts it on the left-hand side, which when we read a book, our eyes automatically go to right. So the right is the dominant page. Yeah. And so he's almost inviting challenge. He's actually, and that seems to be his purpose. To go, look, I'll write this, almost to the sense of the purpose is to provoke a reaction. Yeah. So much so that page is not just, I've left you enough. If you want to write something, you do. It's there. Write something. And we know from the Masonic teaching's perspective that it's engaging with concepts of virtues and morality is actually the purpose. It's almost like the reading into Don Quixote, which is like a case of trying to say that it is the belief and pursuit of virtue is virtually more important than virtue itself.
Yeah.
And so what he's offering there is a case of, look, there, I'm going to talk about it. What do you think? And that's it. It is, what do you think? And I think it's an ingenious a way of engaging people with moral thinking, just to think about it.
Yeah, me too. And I think he was clearly an engineer and he was clearly an artist, and he was almost great at both of those things. And for me, in conclusion to the whole thing, I love it as a mystery. I think it's so nice to think about. I really want to believe the Agnes story, that he did go and do that. And actually, there's a big part of me which thinks that could be true. That could have really have been... Everybody needs a motivator. Yeah. Everybody needs something. And a lot of artists need something to keep them pushing day after day after day. And some people say that he wanted her to come and find it. He wanted her to come back. He wanted her to hear about it somehow and then come and find him and live happily ever after, which, we all hope for in some ways. So that's my conclusion. The other thing is, I'd love to go there and see it. Yeah. I think it would be a wonderful place to go to. And if anybody watching has been there, please do leave in the comments your thoughts on it. But yeah, to your final thoughts on it as a mystery, and was he an artist?
I think for me, it's very evident he's an artist. And to be honest, I know I question the Agnes connection. I think you're quite right. I mean, if you've got like Van Gogh lopping off his ear, I think it's, out of all the things an artist could do, I think that's more of a homage for it. But yeah, I think it seems to be one of those really undervalued things to look at. Whether you look at it as art, whether you look at it as an engineering achievement, or if you look at it as an insight to a person's mind, in the sense of he's got this wonder. I'm still blown away by the book on morality. Not so much of even if his values are questionable, it doesn't matter. The very idea of how to engage with that. I think it's worth to look at this place. The mystery is there because there's questions, and so it's fun to look at.
It is fun to look at, and this is a really fun one to talk about because it's not got the depth of a lot of the mysteries we've spoken about, but there is still something there to hang it on. Billy Idol did a video there, which is fantastic visually. The whole place is fantastic visually. So it would be great to hear any comments about it, any other theories as to how he built it, how he put it together. Was he a student of the ancient Egyptians? Did he just work out some techniques while he was in Canada, etc., etc.? But we really look forward to seeing you again, and we'll see you in the next episode.